life and confidence coach Dianna Leeder, and this is my podcast, the Crave More Life Roadshow. It's here we talk about emotional hits and lovingly kicking our own asses to get through them. Just so you know, it always comes down to being your beautiful, sassy self, living and loving from you, no matter what. So join me to hear about the healing journeys of other women, and you just might become a DIY ass kicker too. Hey everybody, I'm Dianna Leeder and I am the host of the Crave More Life Roadshow. I'm also the lead author of the Find Your Voice, Save Your Life book series that I'm very excited about. We just recently, within the last couple months, published Find Your Voice, Save Your Life 3, Powerful Healers, Spiritual Stories. And we have Laura McKinnon here as well, who wrote for that book, but we're going to get to that in 2 seconds, because I just want to remind you that if you're following the series, please watch for Find Your Voice, Save Your Life 4, Transcendent Men, Real Stories. I'm choking because I'm so excited about that too. It's going to be powerful. I mean, you know, we've heard stories from women, and this book is going to be very different. Very different. So anyway, super excited.
Exciting.
Yeah, super excited. So I want to introduce Laura. So Laura McKinnon is, well, she's amazing to begin with. She's a mom, she's a writer, she's a yoga studio owner in Carmel, California, who weaves the practical wisdom of bringing yoga into daily life into her classes. With the help of her own personal experiences and her certification in grief yoga, Laura is able to assist others to move through their own grief. When she isn't leading workshops and teacher training at her yoga studio, you'll find her most often in the outdoors. Laura has a writing bug, and she's also written another collaborative book called Strong Mothers, More Than a Survival Guide. Don't we all need that? Yes, absolutely. She called her chapter The Way of the Warrior Mama, How to Awaken and Empower the Warrior Within. And her contribution to Find Your Voice, Save Your Life 3 is, her chapter was called, it's chapter 11, and her chapter was called Signs from Spirit, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So you're going to love her, you guys. She's amazing, as I said. She's taken what could have been a debilitating loss and discovered how to stay connected spiritually to her son and the world, really. So I'm very proud to have her here. Thank you, Laura, and welcome to the Roadshow.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here too. So let's start by you telling us about your chapter.
Sure. So as you mentioned, the chapter title is Signs from Spirit, and I really wanted to highlight in that chapter the messages that we receive from Spirit. So to me, they're constantly presenting an abundance of signs. Just they're everywhere. We just need to know how to look for them and be open to actually receiving them. And, they're anything from just here to support you, I love you, remind you of the faith and the hope and the love that exists in this world, to affirm that we're on the right path, or to nudge us if we need to shift where we're going, right? So just kind of always leaning into that divine support, right? We never walk through this life alone. We never walk through this life without support. It just takes us to remember that and then to fall into the grace of that. And then, yes, you are correct. I used the story of the loss of our second child to kind of convey what I wanted to write about as really that whole entire experience, both in the pregnancy that I had with him and the messages that he sent me during the pregnancy and then continued after his departure in this world. So I kind of just talk about how that, if you will, allowed me to have even greater insight and a greater level of connection to spirit than I ever had in my entire life before that.
Tell us a little bit more about that greater connection.
Yeah, so I mean, as a little girl, I was born and raised in a Catholic home. I still am a practicing Catholic. And so it was always a very open discussion about spirit and faith and angels, guardian angels, understanding that we all have one. We prayed every night before going to bed. So I absolutely believed in that. And I knew that I could feel it even as a small child, the grace of spirit, the grace of God with me. But I think even as a small child, I remember, and I wrote this in my chapter, or maybe it was one of my edited parts before the final version. I don't remember, but
There are a few of those.
yeah, right. But I remember even as a small girl, um, I wanted to have a tangible experience. Like I would actually pray like for an angel to come to me and show me themselves, or to have this audible external voice that I could hear and know that that was being spoken to me. I trusted, but I still like wanted to see. And I think that's,
Mm-hmm.
right, true for all humans in some level, right? We want to be able to say, yes, I know this now because I saw it with my own eyes. I heard it with my own ears, and maybe I could even touch it with my own hands. It's a leap of faith for many to believe in something we've never seen and to trust that, right? So anyway, but throughout childhood, I had my own small, experiences of that, and nothing grand. Like I never had an angel that I can recall standing at the foot of my bed. Hello, I'm here. Can you see me?
Here I
But there was something very significant, first in how my son was even conceived, but secondly, the connection that I felt with him, what I felt during my pregnancy, very different from my first. And specifically, the strength of that child's spirit is so profound, so immensely strong. And when I look back on everything in terms of the messages that he was trying to convey to me during pregnancy, I now understand that he knew he was never going to stay. I believe with every fiber of my being that he knew he would be departing. And he was trying to let me know this, probably because he chose me as his mom and he knew me in and out. And I think, like many people, especially when we're struggling with our ability to cope with such a profound loss, we often look at ourselves and how we may have been the cause of that loss. So I really think it was intentional on his part. Mom, this is not on you. Do not blame yourself. There is nothing that you did. There is nothing you could have done differently. I was never meant to stay. And I'm so grateful because it wasn't just that. It was just, and still to this moment, how strong his presence is. We see and hear him almost on a daily basis, and not just me. Many people that I know well or even don't know. It has just astounded me. That was 6 years ago now. It astounds me at how many people he has communicated with. And it's just like, before it was like, okay, here's an example, here's an example, here's an example. I can't even keep up with them now. I mean, it's just that frequent. It's just that abundant. And it just, so there was a moment where I've explained kind of just that experience with my son just blew the door to the spirit world wide open. And that's really how I felt. It just brought me to the precipice right in the middle of this world and that world, where I could just see both clearly from, where I was standing in the middle. And I'm grateful for that because that was a huge piece, and still is, in what consoles me in the personal
Of
pain.
course.
As much as we know he's still here with us, right? His spirit is still here, but we're humans. I mean, we wanted to hold this child in our arms and snuggle up with him at night and celebrate all of his milestones and birthdays and all of these things, just like our other children. So that pain is still pain felt by the human heart, and it always will be. But that's the grace of the peace that his spirit brings to our hearts, is through that ability to connect.
Wow. Yes. Wow. It makes me think about the joy in that ability to connect. The gratitude I know that you feel, that I know that I would feel certainly in that situation, to be able to have to continue a relationship. I mean, obviously, it's not the one that you wanted to start with, but you continue to have a relationship with him, and that's healing and it's loving. And yeah, and I'm not sure that people, everybody would allow themselves to do that or notice. And maybe, maybe you did notice because of your upbringing, but, so to allow yourself to notice what was happening and hear him is amazing.
There's two things with that, and I'll just share you an example. Just the other night, there was like last week sometime, there was a worry about some health concerns with a family member. And my mom that night going to bed was praying. And when she woke up during the night, she had heard, he's going to be fine. Everything will be okay. And my mom, upon awakening, knew immediately that was Bo reassuring her that this person's great spirit here on this plane was going to be just fine. And then she got the call the next morning that yes, everything was just fine. And that was just incredibly reassuring to her. And that again is just one of the millions of examples. But something about what you just said, I also recognize that even people who believe that this is possible, okay, right, okay, I believe in spirit. I believe that spirit can communicate to us on this earthly plane, but it just doesn't happen to me. Right? That's for so-and-so that I know, or someone who just happens to be spiritual, or this, that, or whatever. Way too often I feel that people just say, oh, but I'm not this, or I'm not that, so that will not be my experience. And that was really what I wanted to convey in this chapter, was that I know it's not just limited to, certain selected people. This is for every human being. We all share coming from the same source and the same greater spirit of consciousness. So in that way, whether we want to be or not, we are connected to every single soul that has ever been born. So within that, we all have the capacity to connect with spirit. It's not just that spirit favors one person over another. It doesn't work like that. We're all loved immensely. I actually have a client who's much older than myself, and he teases me like, oh, don't mention me because this might burn up in your hands. I'm not worthy. I've done too many things in my life where I don't deserve that loving grace. I don't care what it is that you've done in your life. You are equally deserving from the most, nobody's perfect, but that person in your mind that, oh, they never do anything wrong. They're such a good, gracious spirit who loves all. No. The grace of spirit is equally with you as it is with that person that you feel is somehow more worthy of you or deserving of you.
Yeah, good point.
And I can't express that enough. Like I'm just even hearing in the back of my head, say that more, say that again. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Take your time.
It's a really difficult time for a lot of humans right now. The last 2 years-ish, whatever, we all suffer. We're humans. We have trauma. We have losses in our life. No loss is greater than another. Loss is loss, and it can create grief. And so I really think that is so needed and necessary for every human being to understand right now, that the eyes of the spirit are never not on you. You are seen, you are heard, you are loved. They understand every trial, challenge that you are going through right now, and they immensely want to love and support you. To me, I see it often as like, some force, just like bringing this comforting, warm blanket. I see it just wanting to just envelop people, wrap them up, and hold them in that grace. We just have to say yes to receiving that, right? Because we have free will. So we can say no, we can say yes. But if we say yes, they will like tenfold bring it forward to us.
Yeah. Wow. And, that's certainly been my experience. So I'm right there with you. And, it's, I think about, based on what you were just saying about, people who are feeling like they're not worthy. So they don't deserve to have that connection. Yeah, I don't think that that's the case either. I think that we are all equally worthy, and we're all here to be guided. It's kind of, it's, as you said, it's saying yes. It's saying yes. It's being open. It's understanding that anything that's coming is full of unconditional love. And, and when you think about it in those terms, how can you turn away from unconditional love? It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your grief yoga.
Sure.
How do you help somebody heal through yoga?
So yeah, I'll just start with my early stages of grief. And mind you, being a yoga practitioner and teacher of as many years that I was prior to this loss, certainly I had certain tools in my basket in terms of just understanding mind, body, spirit connection, how emotions, experiences, especially when they're traumatic, literally can get stuck in our body. And, for all intents and purposes, most often what tends to be available to help work someone through a problem, let's just even back up and not even call something grief, but just, a struggle in your life is, okay, I go see someone and I talk about it, and I talk and talk and talk and talk. And talking to some degree can be very helpful because it's one vehicle to move something from a stuck place, right? So if we don't ever talk about something and we hold it, it doesn't go anywhere, but it stays here, right? But just talking, just sharing by itself is limiting because it's most often just not enough. So quite honestly, for myself, I actually found talking to a therapist was not helpful. In terms of, sure, they could support and they could help reflect back what I had said so I could hear what I was expressing, right? Because sometimes hearing it said back to us is very different than when we say it to someone else. But my greater level of that was actually connecting with other parents that had also lost their babies, because I knew that they understood my level of pain. They were walking the same horrific journey I was in. Whether the cause of death was different or not, it didn't matter. For each of us, our babies still were not here the way that we wanted them to be. It was a safer place, I felt too, where no one would judge something I was thinking or feeling. There's times where in our grief of loss, we have really crazy emotions that maybe we've never experienced before. And we start to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just thought that, or I wanted to say this to somebody. It can be very alarming. So just to hear someone else has thought the same thing, you're like, oh my gosh, it's not just me. Okay, maybe this is kind of normal for just this level of pain that I'm experiencing that is completely new. And then to have parents, especially the mothers that have gone ahead, right? So, okay, this is, that there's something to look towards, like, okay, I'm ahead of you in this journey. So I can help you identify, yeah, that's a landmine you're about to step into. And this is how you're going to help move through that. But even beyond that, so, okay, now I'm months in and I'm just making my way. And I also need to acknowledge prayer. Anytime I'm struggling with anything in my life, the first place I go is prayer, and family. And it's helpful, but yet I still felt stuck. I could feel it in my body and I didn't know how to move it out of my body. So I started following some grief experts, David Kessler and Paul Denniston, and didn't realize at the time, even when I first found them, that there was this whole thing called grief yoga. And then I discovered, I was like, oh, wait, what is that all about? Because I actually went to a weekend-long grief retreat at a very spiritual, facility, just to kind of remove myself from all my day-to-day obligations and just really focus on myself. But even then, after that, that's a whole nother maybe podcast. It was an interesting experience. I'll leave it at that. And I knew my work was still not done. And in many ways, honestly, with grief, I don't think our work is ever done. So now come to grief yoga. When I did come across it, it's a blend of yoga, movement, breath, and sound that we create, combined to first bring awareness to where does the pain, where does the challenge sit in our body, in our heart, in our mind, right? Then once you have this awareness, you can create this connection to it and this way of expressing it so that you can move it, whether it needs to be moved out of your body or you need to move through it from one side to the other, right? Because there's a lot of different ways we can think about moving energy, but it's to move it and then transform it. Okay, so sometimes in our grief, we're feeling a tremendous amount of anger or sadness, but anger and sadness might not be very productive, if you will. It's energy that, okay, it's very charging energy. What can I do with this energy? So when you're able to touch it, when you're able to move it, you can then also find a way to transform it, to shift it, and to reconnect back to love and to empowerment. Because quite honestly, love is the only reason we are experiencing the grief to begin with, right? So we're only grieving what we at least perceive to have lost because we loved it so, right? And so the level of our grief directly equates to the level of love that we had. So when we're able to move that energy, transform that energy, it creates an opening where we can come back to that wisdom and connecting back to love and our own source of empowerment so that we don't feel so stuck or lost, or that we're this victim and this is going to be how it is for the rest of our lives. And when I said about this, we're never done, this work is never done. It's not like we're going to do a grief yoga class and like, okay, I'm done with grief, carry on. You might feel tremendously better, okay, but you're still going to acknowledge the person that you are missing greatly from your life that passed. So the way I've really come to understand my relationship with my grief now is I have to tend to it regularly. I can't just assume that it's never going to raise its head again, that it won't ever be triggered again. It could be 20 years from now, and the right scenario, smell, sound, whatever, could trigger something instantly. So to me, I look at it as no different than someone who had a back injury and they have to do regular back care maintenance, if you will. They've got a set of 5 exercises that they've got to do every morning when they get up and get out of bed to help keep pain out of their body, right? So I'm not necessarily saying you have to practice grief yoga every day, but the more that you are able to understand that we have to do this kind of as a regular self-care, regular maintenance, it's a game changer.
Wow. I love that, because from my experience, when people are in grief, they're there and they can feel it changing. But, I think we all know that it's never going to go away. And when we think about, self-care, or I like to call it self-nourishment, kind of the whole package, often grief pulls us out of that. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is, make that part of that practice, make it another thing that we do to care for ourselves. And I love that.
And I would argue, I think part of the problem, if I can use that word, is the external viewing on grief, meaning the collective, like just how does society address grief, right? For many of us, we know we're given this short little window by everyone else. It's kind of like, oh gosh, a person died 2 years ago. Aren't you over it yet? It's
Yeah.
like, how fast can we just get this thing that we don't want in our life away and under the rug and just gone, shut the door, right? But we know that that's not what happens. And when we
Mm-hmm.
just shut the door and pretend it doesn't exist because, well, it's been 2 years, so I should be fine now. That's actually when, at some point, it's going to rear its ugly head because it's not being addressed, it's being ignored, and it's staying stuck where it is. So that's, to me, that expression component with the grief yoga, being able to move it, to transform it, to change it. Yes, grief will to some extent remain, but it does change. And we do have the power to change our relationship to it and how we experience it. And then the empowering thing for all the other people in our life that witness this work that we do for ourselves, it gives them permission to do the same for themselves.
Right.
Because whether we know it or not, I mean, my next door neighbor, who knows what level of grief that they're carrying that they've never shared with me and never planned to share with me. But perhaps in witnessing how I outwardly express and respond to my grief, they might go, whoa, wait, I could do the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am a firm believer that what we model is the very best learning experience for the people around us. And grief, yeah, you're absolutely right. People don't they don't get it, or they're uncomfortable with it, or whatever it is. So the expectations are huge on somebody just to let's you'll be all right, or let's move on, or when you go back to work, or or whatever it is. It's so to take that time, and yeah, to manage whatever's happening in the body. That energy in the body is, I can't imagine, would be anything but helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our oldest was 6.5 when his brother died. And I remember vividly in the first few days that I was able to arrive back home. And it was just the level of pain was suffocating. I didn't know how to stop crying. And I remember expressing to my midwife who came to check in on me how concerned I was that my son would see me with so much crying. And she said to me, because I think I was saying to her something like, I have to figure out better ways of hiding it from him, or whatever I said. And she said to me, okay, but if you do that, who is going to teach him how to grieve? Who is going to give him the permission when he feels that he wants to cry or needs to cry? But if he never sees you or his dad crying, how does that give him permission that it's safe for him to cry, for him to express, for him to release? And it was just one of those moments where I was just like, oh my gosh, absolutely. There's no handbook that we're handed when we're born. Okay, so when someone dies in your life, no matter how old you are, this is what you do. Okay. Most of us, gratefully, don't experience loss of death until we're much older. But when a child is just hit in the face with that, the worst thing, in my opinion, you could do is to try to hide what it is to grieve from that child, because this is the moment that child begins to learn what it means to grieve, and that it's okay. Because in a way of also coming back to what I said about, if we remember that our grief comes from the love that we had for this person, through our grief, then we also get to celebrate this departed soul, right? We get to celebrate the fact that they existed and that they mattered that much to us.
Yeah, which is beautiful. And adding to that, what you were talking about earlier, making those connections, that's it. And I think it's kind of a common, and I could be wrong, I'm just going from experience, from my own experience, but it feels like a common time when we can see through that those barriers a little bit more, to be able to make those connections with spirit. And I know, and again, only speaking from personal experience, making those connections right then is so powerful and so incredibly healing, and brings so much peace in that moment. You know, it doesn't change anything, but it's a beautiful time for those
Right.
things.
And the other thing that I acknowledged in my chapter, remember I was saying that everyone is equally worthy, deserving, the signs, the connection from spirit, right? Equally the same. We just have to be willing to open our eyes and see them. The next step is to then ask, because spirit will always present signs even without asking. And then our job is to just notice them. But when we ask, in my experience, it's delivered tenfold, right? So whoever might be listening to this, and you may not see it or hear it right away, or maybe it's so quiet you just haven't tuned in just yet, but whoever or whatever you want to connect with, like by name, specifically ask. Or if you don't know, say, guardian angel, this is what I do all the time. I don't know who to ask right now or who to call upon right now. Can you direct me? Can you just put it out there for me? I literally ask my guardian angel to be the messenger for me, because I figure, well, you're up there, you're part of this spirit world, so you already know like all the appropriate channels. So I will literally just say, represent my plea for me, please, because I need help down here, you know? So it's not only okay, but I would say a good idea to regularly ask.
Yeah. Yeah. In any circumstance, for sure.
Oh, gosh, yes. I mean, I tell my kiddo when he goes and he's worried about his math test at school, when I drop him off, I go, don't forget to pray. And what I mean is I go, ask your guardian angel, ask the test angel. Like there's angels all over the place. Some of them, they're unemployed angels, they're unassigned angels. They're just ready for a mission, right? And we just have to call and say, hey, I know that there's an angel floating out there. Please help me. So I say, before you take your math test, just say, math angel, please help me with this test right now. And if you're not sure, just say, guardian angel, go get them for me. I need help on this math test.
Wow, I love it. I love it. And you know what? It's really cool that you're teaching your kids. Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, he's 12 now, so he rolls his eyes at me. The 4-year-old, she's like all in. She's all in. But that's okay. You know, that's my job as a mother, and I'll just keep reminding my older but if he's anything like me, I remember that age. I did the eye roll for the outer thing, but on the inside, I was like, got it, Mom, you know?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, me too. And I think that my kids probably did the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we told them when they were in their teens is now what they practice and what they teach their children. So yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. So Laura, is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners?
Wow. I think I said a lot already.
You did, and it was beautiful.
But yeah, I guess I just, I think just the reminder that our loved ones may change their form, but they never disappear. So yes, their body may die, but who they were inside of their body still is completely intact and exists. They are still with you. They're still watching you, guiding you, loving you. And I think the more that we're open to that, that's the doorway that can lead us into genuinely feeling their presence, and maybe even hearing or seeing. Maybe we notice just something that came out of nowhere. Maybe that was that person leaving that for me to see. So, and we all know those little connections. So, you know, you could task them with even send me a sign that I know is distinctly you, maybe something that only you and I know together and understand together. I guess, you know, you're challenging, if you will, the spirit world to test the validity of it. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is we have to find our way in somewhere. And once you see one and you acknowledge that one, oh my gosh, and you believe in your heart, more will come. many, many more.
Yeah, absolutely. I've experienced that too. Yeah. I'll tell you just a real quick story because this just happened to me the day before yesterday. My parents have both been gone, one a long time, my mother and my dad just maybe 3 years ago. And he was a big country music fan. So we used to, have this back and forth because I wasn't like, I'm talking the old country, the classic country.
Sure.
He just loved it. So yeah, I can remember as a teenager, it was like, do we get to listen to Elton John, Dad? Or no, not in my truck, And just the other day, I'm sitting quietly. I think I was looking at something on my phone, and literally my phone popped up, iTunes or whatever it was, opened and played a Kitty Wells song. I'm pretty sure I don't have Kitty Wells on my phone.
Wow.
And the title of it was a reference to angels. Like, okay, Dad, yeah, gotcha, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, I agree. They're right there, and we just have to allow them to accept that connection.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. Yeah, and what a gift, I mean, I'm sure if you were able to have the choice in that moment to have your dad back with you and sitting at the table, of course, but he's not. And so to me, though, wow, what a gift, though, in that moment, just randomly out of nowhere, to just be graced by his presence, to be graced by his spirit,
Yes.
And that's what can help us carry us through.
Yeah, I agree. It's beautiful.
I love it.
I do too. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming out today. It's
of course.
It's I think your words are going to be really powerful for people that are both in heavy grief now, but also people like me who lost their parents. As I said, my mother's been like 28 years, and wow. I still have messages from her. So it's healing even now.
Yep.
Even after all that
and
time.
It always
So
will be.
Really going to. Yes, I think so too. Your words are really gonna help. That's for sure. So thank you.
You are very, very welcome. Happy to share.
So, listeners, thank you as well for being here. I know Laura was a great guest, and as I said to her, you're going to twig to something that she said. I know it, and I'm very, very grateful that she's been here. I'm grateful that you're here because, as I say at the end of every show, just by showing up and listening, you're creating some awareness in yourself, and that means you're kicking your own ass. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time. If you like today's podcast, hit subscribe at the bottom on your way out, and come find me at cravemorelife.com for even more DIY ass kicking.